Good morning.
Morning.
Everybody awake? Raring to go? All right, my name is Vijay Doshi. I'm here to introduce Craig. If one point here is that if everybody wants to move forward, there will be code demonstrated on the screen, so if you want to be able to read it, it might be useful to move forward unless you have very good eyesight. Let's see, so Craig has been a Zen master with Tableau since 2012, and if any of you, and many of you have, I'm sure, experienced his content out on the internet, things like web data connectors, Google plugins, server APIs. He's passionate about helping developers interact, and actually anybody interact with our APIs, and has done many things to help that move that forward. So without further ado, I will welcome Craig up to talk to us about our REST APIs. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, good morning. And welcome to the final day of TC16, and congratulations, you made it. Hopefully it wasn't too late last night. I was good. I got to bed about 11, so I'm feeling kind of awake, but we'll see. So yeah, my name is Craig Bloodworth, and my goal for this session is to kind of inspire you all to make use of Tableau's REST API, even if you really don't consider yourself a coder or the whole concept of a REST API is completely foreign. And to kick this off, I sort of want to start with a talk about. Good. And start with talking about creativity. And show who thinks sort of coding is really like a true creative process? Okay, good. I've got some converts. Nice. You see, I always thought like coding was something that was done by the IT geeks. The creatives were the ones who drew the interfaces and made pretty pictures, and then they just passed it off to the IT guys to make it happen. And really, I think the change for me, and when I sort of thought, well, no, that's not really true, is when I discovered this, the record macro button in Excel. All right? Now, I'm not being sarcastic here. This is a good thing that Excel did for me, because it was sort of the stepping stone that I needed to get into coding. I tried to do computer science at university, didn't really work for me. I moved on to a different sort of more businessy IT course. But it was this that sort of inspired me to get into code. Now I wanted to automate some sort of functionality in an Excel workbook. And I had no idea like what Visual Basic was. I just knew that there was this thing called macros, and that apparently I could record one. So one day I hit record, and I started clicking around and experimenting. And it seemed okay, seemed good. And then I go into this Visual Basic editor and look at what was there. And okay, so it's generated some stuff. I'd go back, I'd hit record again, click around, make some changes, look at the code that was generated. Eventually, I found myself going straight to the code and making changes there and running it from the editor and seeing what changes were made. And that made it a really sort of nice, responsive environment where I could play, see the code that was generated, and understand it. And on top of that, it was really safe because, of course, Excel workbooks, you can save multiple versions. If you just happen to delete all your data by accident, you can go back and get the old one. And so I could experiment and I could play. And we could really break down my sort of experience in terms of creativity in sort of those main two aspects. It was the responsive nature of this Excel feature that allowed me to understand what was happening. So back to our story. Yes, this environment was responsive, and I could learn, and I could be creative, and it was safe. I could save, I could go back and use all the workbooks. So let's take a look at sort of these two concepts, because they are a fundamental requirement for being creative. Now, responsive is kind of obvious when you think of an artist with a brush. Okay, they've got something pictured in their mind, and they need to be able to make strokes on the page and have the paint or the pen or something show up on the page immediately and respond to their needs and their thoughts. Now, imagine trying to paint, but say the ink or the paint appears like 30 seconds after you touch the page. You couldn't do it. You couldn't experiment. You couldn't think and try to work. Now, this, I think, is something that holds a lot of people back from even just getting into something like a REST API, because you have to go away, you have to start understanding all stuff around it, and then you can finally do something, and even then you've got to sort of figure out some sort of code to write to actually get to do a response, and it just adds delay, it adds a block, and it just stops us doing stuff. What it really doesn't feel like is safe. I don't think anyone thinks coding is safe, right? If you're not actually have written any before. So, if you consider this picture, there's someone risking their life. They're climbing up a rock face. The reason they want to do it is because they've got a harness, they've got a rope, they've got a helmet. Now, if those didn't exist, no one would ever take up climbing. I mean, there's a few that you see on YouTube, but I've tried climbing. And, I get to the top, and I'm like, oh, my God. But, I've got a rope. It's OK. I can get down. Again, with code, if there isn't this safety, if there isn't this environment where we can do the experimentation, and maybe we can undo something that we've just done without having to think about the code or something that we've got to execute, then we can actually do the experimentation. So, yeah, I believe, coding is a creative process. It should be just as creative as creating a dashboard in Tableau. So what we're going to cover in this session. Now, I mentioned, introduced, my name's Craig Bloodworth. So my background, I'm CTO of the Information Lab. We're a partner in the UK. I've been a Tableau Zen master for a few years now and done lots of sort of projects of the web data connectors and this Google plugin. And if you want to sort of keep up on stuff that I'm working on, I'm always tweeting about it. It's a fairly unique name, Bloodworth. Are there any other Bloodworths in the room? No. Never going to happen. Yeah, I always tweet stuff, so if you're on Twitter, follow me on there, and you can keep up with what I'm up to. So we're going to just do sort of a brief introduction about, what is a REST API and why I want to use it. I'm going to then introduce a new tool that I've built just for this session, really, but also for you guys to go off and use, which is going to help you get into the REST API. Even if you're an experienced coder, I'm sure you'll find it useful. If you're brand new to coding, hopefully it'll give you that introduction. It's called TabCommunicate. In this session, we're going to build an onboarding script live. Okay, so we're actually going to get into some code, and we're going to write some code. And hopefully, we should have plenty of time for Q&A, so sort of think of some questions along the way. So yeah, 5 minutes on the REST API. What is a REST API? Well, it is a method of interfacing with an application. Okay, it doesn't have to be a server specifically, just any kind of, most cloud applications have this thing called a REST API. Now, we need some things to go in. Okay, so we need to know a URL, that this isn't any different to something you'd put in your browser, into Chrome. You need a verb. Okay, so this idea that you've got to tell the REST API what you want to do. Right? I want to get something. I want to post you something. I want to update something. And then if you are going to post something, of course, you've got to have a body of data. You've got to have some information that you are actually sending to the server or to the application. And what you get out is a very predictable response. Usually, it's very stripped down. It's just the information that you're asking for. But because it's predictable, you can write code off the back of it so that you can then go off and use that somewhere else. And the response you get out can either be something called JSON, XML, or even HTML. And technically, websites and HTML and everything you are interfacing with sort of a REST API and doing it. So if you think you've never used one before, you have. It's called a website. So this TabCommunicate. Hopefully it is going to help you get into working with the REST API and get over that initial block of how do I just do something to code against it. It is a free tool. It's open source. If you are a developer, it's on GitHub. There's a bunch of resources here, so you can get it online today, tabcommunicate.informationlab.co.uk. You do have to have a public-facing Tableau server in order to use it on the web. I am packaging it up into a download, okay, and that link at the end, it will become available in, let's say, by Monday. Okay, I've got lots of time tomorrow, hopefully I can finish it off. And you'd be able to download, run it on a Mac or in Windows, and interface with your private sort of firewall Tableau server. Okay? And like I say, the code is on GitHub, and feel free to go on there, pull it, and do whatever you want, and send me some feedback, positive feedback, please. That's what you can play with it however you want. So why this tool? Well, we want to be able to work with the REST API in real time. We want to see responses that come back based on things that we're doing. And then we want to make use of those interactions, right? We don't just want to play with the REST API. We actually want it to give us something that we can go off and use to start some coding. There are a couple of nice features in the tool, which I'll point out in a bit. And one to really look out for is a help question mark. It's going to take you directly into the Tableau's own user guide at just the right place. So if you're ever unsure about what you're doing, hit that and you will go into the right place in the user guide. But also a really fun one is I managed to work in an undo button for quite a few of the calls. So if you are going to make changes to your server, you have the potential to just say, OK, I'm going to add a user, and I'm going to delete a user just with one click. There is a safety warning here, though. Okay? It's undo, but it's not backup. If you're doing it on your live production thing and you have it run through a whole bunch of workbooks and you hit delete on every one of them, there isn't an undo button for that. So you'll see the undo button, and if it's there, great, fine, fantastic. If it's not, well, just a little bit careful. Anyway, enough talking. Let's see it. Okay. Oh, yes? Yes, I think we're OK. Thank you. You can uncross your fingers. OK. So the left-hand side of the screen we're going to be working on is this tool, TabCommunicate. The right-hand side is the code that we're going to be writing with it. So let's first of all just have a look at TabCommunicate. So yes, you can go tabcommunicate.informationlab.co.uk. Today it will come up with a screen that looks like this, and you can get some ideas on getting started and things to look out for within the tool. It's very simple. In the top left-hand corner are some controls to use. These are things that the bit that you're going to interact the tool with. Okay, so you're going to put in things like your server URL, your username, your password. You're going to sign in and out. And this is also where all of the REST API endpoints are going to appear in a big long list, and you can choose which ones you want to work with. In the top right is the code output of the action that you have just done. Okay, there are different flavors of the code that come out. There is Ajax, Node, my favorite, PHP in a couple of different flavors, and also Python in a couple of different flavors. And we're also going to try and work in the client library that was demonstrated this week in the keynote and get that in there too. And then at the bottom, this is everything that Tableau Server has responded with. Okay? Again, we're going to see it in a couple of different forms. We're going to see the raw output, which is just in the response tab. It'll parse it out into a nice table, and then also give us kind of like a raw CSV output. And there's a nice little tweak, nice little feature in that one I'll show you in a bit. And also, there's some key variables when we're working with REST API. So these are things like which version of the API you're working with, and the security token and site ID and all that sort of stuff. And then you'll see those appear in the variables. So let's log in. Now, right away, as I put in the URL, it's gone off and found out which version of Tableau Server you're using. If you've gone through the REST API guides at all, you notice that it talks a lot about different versions of the API. Version 1 had very few endpoints that you can hit. Version 2.3, which we're at now, with Tableau Server 10.1, has lots more. And it'll adjust itself based on which version of server you're running. So you're not going to be trying to hit endpoints that aren't valid. Put in my username and password. Sign in. And again, that code in the top right-hand corner has responded to show me what a sign-in actually is in real code. Okay, it's gone off and sent some XML with my credentials. And it's responded down here with those key things that we now need to go off and work with the REST API. So we have, in fact, XMLs. It's nice, I like the picture, but a table is easier, right? So the security token, the site ID, the user ID, these are things that we need to make subsequent calls to the REST API. And because they're so important, I've put them in this variables tab, so they will always be there for future reference. All right, and the tool will make use of them throughout. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will have seen that we now have a new drop-down. We can make use of most of the Tableau Server REST APIs right now. I'm in the process of adding everything. It's a lot of copy and pasting and stuff, but it takes a bit of time, but I will get them all in there eventually. The sort of main ones about querying and doing various interactions are in right now. So let's say we wanted to get a list of data sources. We can just say, query data sources. We'll see the code on the right-hand side has changed. This is what it's going to execute. And I can hit run. And I don't have any data sources, that example. I know I have a workbook, so let's go for workbooks. There we go. And there's a list of all of the workbooks that exist in the Tableau server. Okay, so immediately we're trying to pick the right things to work with. We know sort of in our head what we want to do, what we want to get out. But in this, we can see, well, is this giving me the information that I need? We can start to map out, well, there's things like owner ID. So maybe I want the username, not the owner ID. I'm probably going to have to do some sort of query to get the user information. Okay, we start to know what we're going to be building. As I say, that data tab has sort of a bit more, it's like a copy and paste CSV that you could do, but I thought that was a bit silly, so I also put in an export to CSV button, which let's see if it works. Yep, cool, there's a CSV, and also an export to TDE, because this is Tableau. And actually, no, this one won't work, I don't think. No, it's on the online version it will, but not on this one. Should we open that? Let's see. Excel on a Mac, okay. So there we have that same information. And I also do one extra little thing in that that export bit takes care of something called paging. So in a REST API, usually it will limit the number of results it will return. In Tableau, the most you can return is 100. And as you get into coding, you'll find ways to handle that. Just to get you sort of off the mark from the start, this will do it all for you in the background. So you can list absolutely everything that exists in your Tableau server with that export function. Should be able to create some good dashboards from what's happening on your server, at least.
Does it write that paging code in the code window?
The question was, does it write the paging in the code window? No, not today. We're working out ways to get you into doing things like paging, but in a bit more of a informative way rather than just putting it in there. Okay, so that is the tool. Let's build something. So, as Ben Lauer said on stage in the keynote, and the devs on stage, doing things is boring. Okay? The more you can automate and just have it do things for you, the better. So let's imagine a scenario where we work for a big organization. We have tens of thousands of potential Tableau server users. And we've been given a list of a few hundred to start off with. Fine, we can put those on. But we want that Tableau server to be accessed by anybody at the point they want to. Now, to do that, we could spend a few meetings talking to our Active Directory team. trying to figure out different groups and do syncing and all that sort of stuff. Sounds a bit boring, but you could. Or you could dump your entire user directory onto the Tableau server. I'm sure that won't create any headaches. Or how about we just have the Tableau server create the user as and when they're needed? Okay, why dump tens of thousands of users onto your server when you might only have, say, 200 or 300 who are actually going to use it? So in the script here, and I'm going to try and do this as well so you can see where I'm at. So on the right-hand side. Now, just to sort of save typing, I've gone and created a bit of a page ready to put code into. It's nothing special. Essentially, if I ran it right now, it looks like this, with a gray box. And the output is going to appear in this gray box in the middle here. What we're going to do in the code is give the page, this is being written in PHP, okay? And I'm not going to go through all the different commands and stuff in all the different bits of code in PHP. Just trust me that they work. That's not what this session is about. But you can pay attention to the bit at the top. Maybe you see it says user equals a user. All right, so imagine putting this in your intranet, and the link in the intranet just grabs the user's logged in username, and it's going to pass it through to the script. So we know which user to create. So the first thing we have to do is log in to the Tableau server. We can't interact with it unless we log in and have that token that allows us to make further calls. So let's go back here, and I'll just clear the slate. I'll make sure to pick PHP. You don't have to. You can flick between them, but I always forget which one and end up copying the wrong one out. OK, I'm going to sign in. And now I can just grab. In fact, I could go and grab here, but I also put a little button here, so you can copy it all out. Why do things that are just a pain in the butt? OK. So really simply, like I say, I'm not going to go through too deeply into what the code actually is or why it's written the way it is, but it's going to get the URL, which is a sign-in URL for the REST API. It's passing the credentials the way Tableau Server expects them to be received. It's just for sort of, I didn't want someone looking over your shoulder and seeing your password, so I start it. OK, so you can just change that. That's not actually my password. My password is Craig. Really secure. It then is going to get the response back, and it's going to do this dump. It's just going to return the results that have come back from the server. But we can see the results. We don't need that. So we can get rid of that. I know that I want to get out the various things from here. I want to get out the token, the site ID, the user ID. That's quite a few things. So again, I'm just going to, for speed, copy out. So this is how you extract those things from XML within PHP. OK, so now we need to check whether our new user exists already on the server. All right, there's no point in trying to create them if they already exist. Let's change the endpoint to be get users on site. We'll run that and find, yes, we do get a list of users. Great. So let's copy that one out, paste it in. Now, there are one or two things that we just need to do to update this. This is kind of like, you could call it pseudocode. You can make tweaks to it just to make it a bit more reusable. So there are things in here like the site. This is all in the REST API documentation, but the site ID gets put into the URL. Well, we know the site ID because it's up here in a variable, so I can just drop in site ID. The one important one that you should be updating is the token here, okay, for authorization. It will work. It'll because when you log in, it's going to get a new token, and then it's going to say, well, that token's no longer valid, so you need to make sure you're updating with the latest token. And again, I extracted it up here into this variable token. OK, that's all we need to do, and it's going to dump out the results again. Now, this is where, if you want to get a bit of background on each of these calls, this little help button is really useful. So it's going to take me directly to the page for the get users on site. And all of the list down here for all the endpoints perfectly aligns with all of the drop-down list. Okay, I wanted to make it as close to the user guide as possible. And also, any of the variables in here will also appear in the same way. So you can do a one-to-one matching between the user guide and the tool. Now, there is a really interesting thing about some of the API endpoints that we see come through now, and that is that you can do filtering. Okay? So dumping out the whole user directory and then having to iterate through and find out if that user's in the list is really, it's painful. It would just be better to just drop in a filter into the URL and say, does this user exist? If it returns one user, then we know it does. If it returns no users, then we know the user doesn't exist. Make sense? Okay. So to do that, I just need to add on this filter. I need to say, I'll go down. No, it's on a different page. That's always. Go filtering and sorting. And you'll see all the kind of different things, the different expressions that you can do to do this filter. I can just say name. I believe it's colon equals colon, and then just drop in the name, the username that I'm going to search for, and in this case it's just the variable user. So where we're at, we're going to search for this user. If the user exists, it's going to return a user count of 1. If it doesn't exist, it's going to return a user count of 0. And once again, let's go down to my little cheat sheet. Save typing it out. I love copying and pasting. I hate typing. OK. So within the results are returned, it has this user count in there of the total number that are available. So I've got that out. Now I can just say if user count is equal to 0, then go off and create that user. Else, how about we forward on the user to the Tableau Server page if they exist? All right? Think about how that would work in an intranet. You could just have the big Access Tableau Server button, and it doesn't matter whether you exist on the server or not. That's the button you just always click, and it'll forward you through or creating you depending on which one you are. So here's how we forward. OK, cool. All right, we're going to go back across to the left-hand side now. OK, so going back over here. So the user doesn't exist. We need to create them. Add user to site. Sounds like a good one to use. We have a few more things we can choose in this call. So first of all, we have to have a username for this new user. OK, a user. We can choose what level of user we want them to be. So let's just make them an interactor. And then there's an authentication method. So if anyone's ever used SAML, site-level SAML on their Tableau server, you can choose between having a user be local authentication or site SAML authentication. And that's essentially what this is either server default or forcing it to use SAML. So we'll just use a default, hit run, and we'll see how Tableau responds. It gives us an ID, gives us the username that it created, and the roles that were assigned to it. Cool. So let's copy that out. Again, paste it in. Now, there's no sort of, this code is awful. It is, we're already up to 100 lines of writing it. You know, it's not meant to be nice and compact. It's just meant to work. You can then pass it to the IT guide to productionize it if you want, but at least, you know, it speeds up the process. So, site ID. The a user. We can drop in the username of the person in the call. Again, drop in the token. And we should be good to go. So I made a call here with TabCommunicate to get that code out and to test how it worked. That user now exists on the server. So if I run this again, it's going to say, well, the user exists. Well, we can tidy up our testing. This one knows how to undo the add user. Essentially does a delete user call. But it's kind of a nice way that the tool works is it knows any companion calls it can make to do an undo. So again, I can hit undo. It's been executed. This call doesn't actually have a response that comes out, and so I'll make sure you know that. And you can see that what's been executed on the top right. So we can now keep going. We need to now set a password for this user. You might have noticed we only added a username. We didn't add a password. This one is a bit weird for me in the REST API space. It's one I'd like to see cleaned up, maybe. Essentially, if you create a user, the user exists in this kind of user limbo. Okay? They can't log in because they don't have a password. If they were in Active Directory, I guess it would work. But in sort of local authentication, in SAML authentication, they need a password assigning to them in order for them to be able to log in. So we can do that. We can say, well, actually, let's add that user back so they do exist. And I'm going to go and grab the user ID for that user, because I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking I might want to undo this and delete them again a bit later. I put in this scratch pad just as a place purely to paste stuff and to store it for later. It's a text box. It's nothing really special, but I can just drop in the user ID, and then I can go back to it and get it if I need it later. So let's do update user. Oh, I need a user ID. Cool. I have it right here. I can add in a full name. I can add in an email address. Let's just add in a password, TC16 Austin. Okay, we can change the site role and all that sort of stuff, but we just keep it simple. Let's run it. It responded. So let's copy that one out. Okay, the more we get into this, the more we just keep doing things like modifying that site ID. Oh, that user ID, we need that. Now, I didn't extract that in the previous one, so I need to go back and grab that new user ID. So that I now have it to work with. There's the password that I'm going to assign to it. How about we generate a random password, and we could always return it to the user when they go to log in. So again, this is something specific to PHP, but you can just do a unique ID function to get a random character and a character string. We can drop that in there. Again, we want our token. Okay, now we're good to go. We've set the password. We now just need to give the user back that password, all right, so they can then go and log in. And once again, I've just gone ahead and written a way to respond with that. Okay, so let's tidy up. I'll grab that user ID. We'll go and remove user. Okay, and just to show that there's no sort of, crazy magic in here, I'll refresh the user list. And we'll see that a user doesn't exist right now in the user list. Okay, now code on stage. What could go wrong? I have a backup. It's all right, it'll run. So we have this link that we've sent our user to. It says user equals a user. Hit enter, and straight up we just have, welcome to Tableau. Your username is a user. There is your random password. Go to Tableau. Oh, let's log out. a user, put in the password, and sign in. So, minimum typing, mostly copy and paste, and we managed to get something that works in about sort of 10, 15 minutes. Now let's just break my mouse again for the fun of it. There we go. Okay. So what do? We had a scenario where there was no user that existed on the server when they tried to access it. We ran through a script to create that user, and then we sent the user to the Tableau server without them knowing what on earth was going on. It just all went on in the background, and you get to go and have a nice cup of coffee and not be bothered by a bunch of emails saying, can Bob be added to the Tableau server, please? Now, think of it like, I kind of want to leave you with a summary of going forward with something like this, because it's a bit of a step change. I know you're maybe mostly Tableau people. Okay, you've been told there's no coding with Tableau, and now it's like, okay, so we want to do a bit more, bit of automation. You've got to go into coding. My goal with this was to try and inspire people to do coding and to see that it doesn't have to be this really scary experience. And sort of think about this. There's a time when you wouldn't have dared sort of be creative with a data-driven report, right? Back to the report factory, you'd have sent it off to someone who was a specialist to do it and given them requirements, and it would have taken 3 months. And we know that story is old, and Tableau has just blown it up completely. That seems completely crazy, right? You go to this conference, and it's just like, why would I ever go back to that? And okay, so maybe you don't create production-ready code, but at least you create something that will work and that you can test and you can play around with and you can be creative with. And maybe just like you do with a dashboard where you get the story, get the message up, and then maybe you get someone in a center of excellence or something to look at it and polish it before it goes onto the production site. Think about it this way. Create some code, test it, play with it, make it work, and then ask the expert to go, okay, let's make this better. But at least you're in the room and you're in the conversation, and you can start to go along that road. Now, Tableau make all of their extensibility stuff, you may hear it referred to as an SDK or a REST API. It's made as available as possible. Okay, they do lots of work to just make it super simple so that at least you can get in and understand what you're trying to do. And I hope sort of with the addition of something like TabCommunicate, you can go along that road and just get over that initial hump of how on earth do I start working with a REST API. And at minimum, you can use it to export your whole server to a TDE and start analyzing the heck out of it. So what do we go through? We decided that creativity and coding don't have to exist in separate spaces. They can actually come together as long as we have the right environment, the right tools. And we've gone through this tool, TabCommunicate. Again, there's the resources for the links, and I will promise to get the download up and running as soon as possible. And I'll blog about it. If you go on the information lab.co.uk, I'll put up a page and a blog dedicated so you can get some background information as well. And we went through and built a user creation script. I will put that in GitHub as well and link to it, so if that interests you and you want to show it off to someone, then make use of it and change it and play with it, whatever you want to do. Now, believe it or not, I do actually like doing these things, this kind of presentation. In order to do it again, I need everyone to get out their phone right now. There's some people taking pictures. Just sort of switch to the app, fill in the survey. I believe you go 5-star, 5-star. He was awesome. Be creative. We do have lots of time for Q&A. Oh, yeah, about 15 minutes. If you do need to run off to another session, please feel free. I hope you really enjoy the last day of the conference. Make great use of it. I don't know about you. I am so excited by Bill Nye this afternoon. I think that's going to be great. And have a safe trip home, whether you're going today, tomorrow, whatever, and hope to see you back next year. Any questions? Yes, to the back.
So what about some enterprise level BI shop and we use Active Directory and we are just automated basically?
Sure, okay, so yeah, the question is the comparison between what we just wrote here, the code to add users manually, and Active Directory and Active Directory sync. This was just sort of one use case if you didn't have Active Directory. If you do have Active Directory and you're all set up to do the syncing and everything, absolutely fantastic, stick with it. Okay, it will do everything for you. Some people don't. Some people put their server up in the cloud or maybe on Tableau Online or something. They want to just add users ad hoc. Okay. So the script that we wrote is just to do that bit, to take away that manual adding users. If you're already set up to do it, fantastic. But there are loads more use cases for the REST API. Okay, no problem. Yes?
Just to expand on her, remove those people who have left. In other words, I can validate with the Active Directory and just go ahead and remove those.
Okay.
Because currently my administrators do it manually.
Sure. So yeah, the question was if people leave the organization, they're still, they might be removed in the Active Directory, but then they still exist on the Tableau server. Mainly the issue with that is once a user has created something on the Tableau server, they are then the owner of it. And they can't delete a user who is an owner of something. You can only unlicense them. Now, I'm trying to think about how you would do there isn't a change owner in the API right now, I don't believe. No. So it's, first of all, a feature request. You saw Ben Lauer on stage. You know what he looks like. Go find him, grab him, tell him you need to change owner ID. OK, great. Thank you. If you find me later on in BioMUB, I'll show you how to do it without the REST API. There are other ways you can do it. OK.